Little girl begged. "Please, don't tell Daddy, but billionaire father saw. Don't you dare touch my son again." Her voice sliced through the air. Then came the slap. Sharp, loud, final. In that golden living room of the Hale mansion, beneath chandeliers worth more than most homes, a 10-year-old girl fell to the marble floor, her small hands trembling, her eyes begging for mercy from her own stepmother. And upstairs, a father who thought he had the perfect family was about to walk in and see the truth that would tear his world apart. In a house where everything looked perfect, love had turned into punishment. What would you have done in his place? Looked away? Or stepped in? Welcome to Emotional Echoes, a channel where emotions come alive and every story leaves a lasting echo in your heart. Please subscribe to Emotional Echoes. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers so more souls can feel these stories. Stay with my video till the very end and let me know where you're watching from so I can see how far this story spreads. Now, let me tell you what really happened inside that house, where one slap changed everything. Ethan Hale was the kind of man people admired from afar. At 42, he had everything the world said: defined success, a billion-dollar company, a beautiful wife, 2 children, and a mansion that could fit entire lives inside its glass walls. Yet, for all that brilliance, there was one place he rarely looked closely enough: his own home. Ethan Hale had not planned to be home that early. The meeting in Midtown ended sooner than expected, and for the first time in months, he decided to surprise his family instead of his board of directors. The drive back to Westchester was quiet, the kind of quiet he used to crave after long days. Yet something about that silence felt too heavy. As he opened the door, a sharp cry broke through the marble hallway, slicing the air like glass. He froze. The sound wasn't just crying, it was a child's plea. Sophia's voice trembled from the living room, followed by Victoria's sharp tone. He followed the echo, his steps slow, but his heart racing. What he saw when he turned the corner would stay with him forever. Victoria stood in the center of the room, her perfect hair pulled back, one hand raised high. Sophia was on the floor, clutching her small face, blood tracing from her nose to her chin. Noah's toy car lay upside down nearby, its wheels still spinning. Noah himself was crying in the corner, confused and scared. Victoria's words came out like venom. "You jealous little brat. You hurt my son because you hate me." Each word hit harder than her hand. Ethan's throat went dry. For a moment, his mind refused to process what was happening. His brain whispered excuses. Maybe she slipped. Maybe Sophia said something, but the truth was right there, raw and undeniable. Sophia looked up, her eyes wide, searching for him like she didn't believe he was real. Her lips quivered. "I didn't mean to. Daddy." Hefel. "I tried to help." The words barely made it out before another slap cut the air. Ethan moved. His voice exploded before he even realized. "Victoria, stop. What are you doing?" The room fell silent, the kind of silence that hurts your ears. Victoria turned to face him, her expression shifting from rage to shock to something darker: defiance. He could still hear Noah crying, could still see Sophia's trembling shoulders. Everything he had built, the house, the company, the image of perfection, felt like a lie collapsing in front of him. Inside him, 2 things fought: the instinct to protect and the guilt of having ignored what his gut had been trying to tell him for months. He saw every time Sophia flinched when Victoria's hand brushed her hair, every fake smile she forced at dinner, every "it's fine" Daddy that never sounded fine. He wanted to tear the world apart for not seeing it sooner. Victoria spoke first, her voice shaking but proud. She hurt Noah. I was teaching her a lesson. Ethan's voice dropped low, almost a whisper. You call that teaching? She's 10 years old. Victoria, 10. The last word broke like glass in his throat. He could feel his own pulse in his temples, could barely breathe. Sophia tried to stand, her small hands still covering her face. Her eyes met his, full of fear, but also something worse, disbelief. Like she didn't expect him to choose her. That single look shattered him more than anything. He walked over, knelt down, and wiped the blood from her lip with his sleeve. His hands shook. I've got you, sweetheart. It's over. His voice cracked on the last word. Behind him, Victoria muttered, You'll regret taking her side. He didn't look back. He couldn't. For the first time, he understood what real failure felt like. Not the kind that costs money, but the kind that costs trust. He lifted Sophia into his arms, feeling how light she was, how she didn't resist, but didn't cling either. She had already learned not to expect comfort. As he turned toward the door, the setting sun hit the glass walls of the mansion. The light should have been warm, golden, beautiful. But all Ethan could see was the reflection of a family that no longer existed. When Ethan held Sophia that evening, her small hands still trembling against his chest, he realized something unbearable. This wasn't the first time she had been hurt. It was only the first time he had seen it. The truth didn't strike like lightning. It unfolded slowly, dragging him back through the years to the moment everything began to fall apart. 4 years earlier, Ethan's life had already been split in two. Grace, his first wife, had been the heart of everything he built. She balanced his fire with calm, his ambition with empathy. The night she died in a car crash on her way to pick up Sophia from ballet practice, Ethan was on a flight to London, closing a deal he thought would secure their future. When the call came, he didn't break down. He simply stopped feeling. For months after, he moved through life like a machine, working 16-hour days, sleeping at his office, convincing himself that if he built more, the emptiness would shrink. But grief doesn't fade when you bury it under success. It festers quietly, waiting for silence to grow. Sophia was 7 then, too young to grasp death, but old enough to feel its absence. Every morning she waited by the window with 2 bowls of cereal, one for herself and one for a mother who would never come home. Ethan told himself that keeping busy was how he stayed strong for her. But what Sophia needed wasn't strength. It was presence. A year later, at a charity gala for children's hospitals, Victoria appeared. She was 29. Stunning, articulate, the kind of woman who always knew how to enter a room. She introduced herself after his speech about Grace's foundation. Her voice was warm, her tone precise. She said she admired how he kept working to help others after such a loss. And for the first time in months, someone looked at him, not with pity, but with admiration. She told him she had lost her own mother young. The empathy in her eyes made him believe she understood a kind of pain he could share with no one else. It started small. She began sending thank you notes after events, offering to help manage Grace's charity. When they met again, she brought Sophia a bracelet, saying it reminded her of her own childhood. Ethan didn't see manipulation. He saw comfort. Grace's absence had left him too tired to feel guilt, too lonely to question warmth when it finally appeared. Victoria stepped into his life like a light after endless dark, and he mistook its glow for healing. By the time Sophia turned 9, Victoria was a constant presence, She helped organize birthdays, brought laughter back to dinners, and told him he deserved to move on. Ethan didn't fall in love quickly. He simply surrendered to relief. He wanted to believe he was allowed to feel alive again. They married 2 years after Grace's death. The wedding was elegant, intimate, tasteful. Ethan didn't notice that Victoria chose every detail, from the flowers to the vows. He only saw his daughter smiling faintly in her pale pink dress, standing between two worlds she didn't understand. When Noah was born the following spring, Ethan thought he had finally rebuilt his family. He felt joy again, the kind he hadn't dared to touch in years. Victoria was radiant, gentle, attentive. She called Sophia her little helper and said the girl had such a kind heart. For a brief time, the Hale home felt warm again, but beneath that calm, small fractures had already begun to form. It started when Victoria began managing the household in ways that left no space for Grace's memory. She replaced the framed photos, redecorated Sophia's room, and suggested they stop visiting Grace's grave. So often it was better for everyone to move forward. Ethan didn't see cruelty in it. He saw practicality. He told himself she was trying to build a new life for them. But Sophia noticed. The lullabies changed. The hugs felt shorter. The bedtime stories stopped mentioning her mother's name. She tried to please Victoria, but every attempt turned into correction. Don't speak with your mouth full. Don't touch Noah without asking. Don't bring up the past. Ethan thought Victoria was teaching discipline. He didn't know she was slowly rewriting what family meant. Inside, Sophia learned to shrink herself, to be invisible so she wouldn't be scolded, to say thank you even when it hurt. Ethan never saw the way she flinched when Victoria's shadow crossed her doorway, or the way she froze before answering a question. He told himself she was adjusting, that grief took time. He never wondered why her laughter had gone missing. Looking back now, holding his daughter's bruised face in his hands, Ethan finally saw what he had missed. Victoria hadn't saved him from the darkness. She had learned how to live inside it and how to make sure no one else escaped. After Noah was born, the Hale mansion seemed peaceful for a while. Victoria moved through the house like a queen who finally owned her kingdom. She ran everything with precision, the meals, the schedules, even the laughter. And Ethan, too exhausted from years of building empires, mistook her control for care. But behind that quiet order, a small, invisible war had already begun. It started with the little things. Victoria began calling Sophia her little helper, a phrase that sounded sweet to strangers, but felt like an order at home. She had Sophia fold laundry, fetch bottles, clean toys. Ethan thought it was good for the child, something to keep her busy, to teach responsibility. What he didn't see was how the line between helping and serving began to blur. When Ethan came home early one evening, he found Sophia kneeling by the dining table, wiping the floor, while Victoria talked on the phone. He almost said something, but Victoria looked up and smiled, saying, she spilled the milk and wanted to clean it herself. Such a good girl. Sophia kept her head down. Ethan smiled faintly and walked on, never noticing how the child's hands trembled. Over the months, Victoria grew bolder. She controlled Sophia's routines, what she ate, when she slept, even how long she could play outside. Every rule came with a warning. Don't wake Noah. Don't touch things that aren't yours. Don't embarrass this family. Sophia learned early that the wrong word could turn a calm room into a storm. Maria, the housekeeper who had cared for Sophia since birth, noticed first. She tried to comfort the child quietly, brushing her hair, whispering prayers in Spanish. Your papa loves you. Maya. He just doesn't see everything yet. But even Maria's kindness became dangerous. Victoria once caught them talking and smiled too sweetly. The next day, Maria's cleaning schedule had doubled. Ethan began to sense tension, though he couldn't name it. Sometimes, he'd walk into a room and feel the air change. The laughter would stop. Victoria would greet him warmly, while Sophia stood silent behind her. He told himself he was imagining it, that the discomfort came from grief, not cruelty. One night, he heard Victoria's voice rising from the living room, sharp and cold. Sophia's small voice answered something too softly to hear. Ethan paused halfway down the stairs. His hand tightened on the railing. For a moment, he wanted to step in, but then he exhaled and told himself quietly, "It's just discipline. I don't want to overreact again." He turned back toward his study, not knowing that every step away from that sound carved a deeper distance between him and his daughter. Victoria's control spread like a shadow. When guests came, Sophia was sent to the kitchen with a small plate Maria prepared. "It's better that way," Victoria said with a smile. "Less awkward for the adults." Ethan never questioned it. He laughed, poured wine, let the evening continue. Later, when he saw Sophia's untouched dessert in the fridge, he told himself she must not have been hungry. One morning, Sophia noticed her picture was missing from the living room wall. It used to hang beside her father's, her on his shoulders at the zoo, both smiling at the camera. She searched every frame twice before asking Victoria. The woman smiled and said, "It didn't match the new decor." Sophia didn't ask again. That night, she sat by the window, pressing her forehead against the glass, whispering to herself, "Maybe if I'm good tomorrow, she'll put it back." Victoria had a gift for cruelty that never left a mark. She never shouted when Ethan was around. Instead, she used calm words that cut deeper than anger. "You should be grateful, Sophia. Not every child gets a second mother. Or, you need to learn your place, so you don't grow up spoiled like your father's friends' kids." Sophia didn't understand the words fully, but she understood the tone. It meant she didn't belong. Maria tried to warn Ethan once. It was late, after dinner. When Victoria had gone upstairs, she told him quietly, "Sir, the little one, she's afraid." Ethan smiled, tired and distracted. "Maria, she's just adjusting. Victoria's strict, but she's helping. Don't worry so much." He didn't see the pain in Maria's eyes. As the months passed, Sophia became quieter. She stopped drawing, stopped waiting by the window for her father's car. She ate quickly, spoke softly, and apologized for everything. Victoria called it good manners. Ethan called it maturity. Only Maria knew it was something else entirely, the silence of a child who had learned that love had conditions. When Maria was finally dismissed, the house grew even quieter. Victoria said she wanted privacy for the family. Ethan agreed too easily, telling himself Maria deserved rest after so many years. He didn't notice Sophia standing by the window, watching the car drive away, her hand lifted in a small, uncertain wave. That night, the house felt colder. Sophia lay awake in the dark, listening to Noah's soft breathing in the next room. She whispered into the quiet, "I'll be good tomorrow. I promise." Down the hall, Ethan sat at his desk, staring at his reflection in the dark window. For a fleeting moment, he thought he heard a small sob carried through the vents. He hesitated, listening. Then he shook his head, convincing himself it was just the wind. He didn't know that every sound he ignored was a cry Sophia had already learned to silence. That afternoon began like any other, but something in the house felt wrong from the start. The air was heavy, sharp in a way Sophia had learned to recognize, like the stillness before a storm. Victoria had been on the phone all morning, pacing the living room, her voice clipped and tense. Sophia didn't understand the words, only the tone. Later, she would remember one sentence, hissed through clenched teeth. "You can't just pull out of the partnership now. I've done everything for this family." When she hung up, she stood still for a long moment, staring at her reflection in the window. Then she turned, eyes cold, and said, "Sophia, watch your brother. Don't let anything happen to him." There was no warmth in her voice, only warning. Then she grabbed her keys and left for a salon appointment she didn't need. For the first time that day, the house was quiet. Sophia sat on the carpet beside Noah, building towers with his blocks, trying to make him laugh. For a little while, they did. He giggled when the tower leaned. She pretended to be shocked, and for a moment it almost felt like family again. But when the tallest tower toppled, Noah stumbled backward, tripping on his blanket, and hit the corner of the rug. It made a soft thud, not enough to hurt him badly, but enough to make him cry. Sophia panicked. "I'm sorry." "Noah, don't cry. Please don't cry." She carried him to the couch, pressed a cold towel against the small bump on his forehead. She whispered the lullaby Grace used to hum, praying the sound would calm him before Victoria came home. But luck has a cruel sense of timing. The front door opened before Noah stopped crying. High heels clicked sharply across the marble floor. "What happened?" Victoria's voice cut through the air like a blade. Sophia froze. Her hands trembled. "I fell," she stammered. "I tried to." The slap came so fast, it barely existed between movement and pain. The world blurred. "You jealous little brat," Victoria hissed. "You hurt him because you hate me." Sophia shook her head, tears spilling. "No, I didn't. I swear." He just, another slap, harder this time, sent her to her knees. Noah screamed, "Stop." But Victoria pushed him aside. What Sophia didn't see was the storm already raging inside the woman, standing above her. The failed business deal that morning, the headlines about Ethan's company, the way he'd been distant at dinner, distracted, barely listening. Every insecurity she'd buried was clawing its way out. In that moment, Sophia wasn't a child. She was a target, a living reminder that Victoria would never be enough. "You ruin everything," she shouted, grabbing Sophia by the hair. "You think your tears make you innocent. You're just like her, always playing victim." Sophia covered her head, crying softly, not from pain, but from shame. The same shame she'd carried for years. The belief that love had to be earned. She whispered, "I'm sorry," over and over, but each word only made Victoria angrier. "Sorry doesn't fix what you broke." And then another voice cut through the chaos. A man's voice, sharp, terrified. "Victoria, stop." Ethan stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his coat. He had left work early after another tense argument with Victoria over her spending, intending to make peace. Instead, he found her standing over their daughter, hand raised, eyes wild. For a heartbeat, he couldn't move. His brain refused to process what his eyes saw. His wife towering over his child, his son crying in the corner, his home, a battlefield he'd never seen forming. When he finally moved, his voice erupted, raw and shaking. "What are you doing to her?" Victoria turned, startled, her face pale. "She hurt Noah," she said quickly, her voice trembling between fear and fury. "I caught her lying again. She dangerous." Ethan looked at Noah, who was crying but unhurt, clutching his blanket. The red mark on his forehead had already faded. He turned back to Victoria, disbelief breaking through his calm. Dangerous. She's 10 years old. Sophia looked up, eyes swollen, searching for something she hadn't seen in years. Belief. Her lips quivered as if she was afraid to speak. Del. I didn't. Victoria laughed. Sharp and brittle. You're defending her again. Of course you are. She's not even ours. She's just a reminder of her. The words hit him like a blow. Grace's name hung unspoken but heavy between them. All the pieces fell into place, the control, the jealousy, the coldness. She had never loved Sophia. She had simply wanted to erase her. Ethan knelt beside his daughter, brushing the hair from her tear-streaked face. It's okay. Sweetheart. You're safe now. His voice cracked, thick with tears he'd buried for years. Behind him, Victoria's voice rose again. Despérate. You'll regret this. Ethan, you'll ruin our family for her. He turned to face her, eyes no longer filled with confusion, but with clarity. Our family. His voice was steady, cold. You already did that. He lifted Sophia into his arms, feeling how light she was, how she didn't cling, but didn't resist either. She had already learned not to expect comfort. As he held her, the light from the rain-streaked windows fell across their faces, and for the first time, Ethan understood what real failure felt like, not losing a company, but losing the chance to protect what mattered most. Behind him, Victoria's voice broke into a sob. You'll regret this. Ethan didn't look back. I already do, he whispered, and carried Sophia out of the room. For a long moment after the storm of that night, no one spoke. The only sound in the Hale mansion was the rain beating against the glass walls and the shallow breaths of a little girl trying not to cry too loudly. Ethan stood frozen, Sophia still in his arms, his heart thundering with something stronger than anger awakening. The man who once solved every problem with silence finally realized silence was the problem. Victoria stepped back, her face streaked with mascara, voice trembling as she pointed at Sophia. You're being manipulated. Ethan, she's lying. She's always lying. That child has poisoned this house since the day she arrived. She reached for his arm. Despérate. You know how much I love you. I was just protecting Noah. You can't let her destroy us. Ethan looked at her, but his eyes no longer held confusion. They were steady, cold, almost foreign to the man he used to be. Protecting. You call this protection? His voice shook, not from fear but from disbelief. He glanced at Sophia, whose face was pressed against his shoulder, eyes wide open as if she couldn't trust what was happening. He whispered softly to her, It's okay, sweetheart. Daddy's here now, and for the first time in years. He meant it. He walked toward the hallway, still holding Sophia. His phone buzzed in his pocket, but he ignored it. He turned back to Victoria, his tone even. I'm calling the police. Her face twisted in shock. What? You're not thinking straight. Ethan, this will ruin everything. The company, your name, your life. He stopped. My name doesn't matter. My daughter does. He pulled out his phone and dialed. Victoria lunged forward, grabbing his wrist. You're insane. She's manipulating you. She's making you feel guilty for Grace's death. That's all this is. Ethan's hand didn't shake this time. His voice dropped, calm and deadly. Grace died in an accident, but you're killing what's left of her every day in this house. As he spoke, the last piece of denial inside him broke. He realized he had been living with a stranger who fed off control and wore love like perfume, sweet from afar, suffocating up close. The call connected, his tone turned professional, detached. Yes, this is Ethan Hale. I need a child protection officer and a police unit at my address. There's been domestic violence against a minor. Victoria's jaw fell open. Her confidence, her poise, the charm that once disarmed entire rooms gone. She backed away, shaking her head. You're going to regret this. You're ruining our family for a mistake. Look at her. She's not even hurt that bad. She'll forget tomorrow. Ethan's eyes hardened. He won't. When the police arrived, the house no longer felt like his. Officers asked quiet questions, moving through the cold marble rooms like surgeons. Sophia clung to his shirt, flinching whenever someone raised a voice. The social worker, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, knelt beside her and asked gentle questions. Sophia hesitated, then looked at Ethan. He nodded. Tell the truth. Honey, I'll be right here. Her small voice cracked as she spoke, halting at every memory she had buried. How Victoria made her clean Noah's toys. How she wasn't allowed to eat with the family. How the picture of her and Daddy disappeared from the wall. She didn't cry until she said the words, I thought if I stayed quiet, she'd love me more. The room fell silent. Ethan's eyes burned. He looked down at her, voice trembling. You don't ever have to earn love, Sophia. Not from anyone. Victoria tried to interrupt, sobbing louder now. This is ridiculous. She's exaggerating. She's been unstable since Grace died. Ethan turned toward her slowly. No, she's been broken because I let it happen. That was the moment she realized he was no longer hers to manipulate. The police asked her to step aside for questioning. She screamed about lawyers, about money, about reputation. But none of those things could touch what she had already lost. Ethan signed the report, his signature firm but heavy. When the officer asked if he wanted a restraining order, he didn't hesitate. Yes, she doesn't come near my children again. Sophia watched him quietly, her fingers tangled in his sleeve. For years, she had prayed without believing. Tonight, she saw it, a father finally standing between her and the monster. When they escorted Victoria out, she looked back one last time, her eyes full of disbelief. You'll regret this, Ethan. He didn't answer. He only looked down at Sophia, brushing her hair gently behind her ear. We'll be okay now. She looked at him, uncertain, like someone waking from a nightmare too long to remember where reality began. But when she whispered, You believe me? Right, Daddy. He nodded, tears spilling, despite himself. Always. Outside, the rain began to ease, tapping softly against the windows as the sirens faded into the distance. Ethan sat on the couch with both children. Noah had fallen asleep, clutching his sister's arm, unaware of how close his world had come to breaking. Sophia leaned into Ethan's chest, eyes heavy but calm. For the first time, she felt safe. For the first time, she believed her father saw her. Ethan stared at the family photos still hanging on the wall, perfect smiles. Empty moments. He took them down one by one, leaving only one space empty. Tomorrow, he thought, there would be a new picture. One that wasn't perfect, but real. One that didn't hide pain behind glass. And as he sat there in the quiet aftermath, he whispered to himself, I may have failed once, but never again. When the sirens faded that night, Ethan thought the worst was over, but the real storm came with the morning light. By sunrise, his name was everywhere. The first headline flashed across the television in his office lobby. Billionaire Ethan Hales, wife under investigation for child abuse. By noon, the story had spread to every network. His face was on morning TV, his home behind yellow tape on every news feed. Reporters camped outside the gates of Hale Estate, their cameras flashing like gunfire every time a car passed. The man once celebrated as a visionary of American business was now a symbol of scandal. He tried to ignore it, but the weight of it seeped into every corner of his life. Clients withdrew. Investors called in panic, and his board demanded statements that sounded more like apologies. The same people who once called him a family man now whispered words like unstable and reckless. The media didn't care that he was the one who had protected his daughter. They only cared that a billionaire's perfect image had cracked. At first, Ethan wanted to fight to fix it like every other crisis before. But this wasn't a company problem. It was a human one. No PR strategy could repair the truth. He looked at Sophia's small hand, clutching his sleeve during the social worker's visit, and realized that for the first time, he couldn't control the narrative. He could only choose what to protect. When the cameras swarmed outside his office the next day, Ethan didn't go in. Instead, he called an emergency board meeting. His assistant tried to stop him, terrified of the fallout, but his voice stayed calm. "I'm stepping down," he said, simply. The silence on the line was louder than any argument. Someone asked if he was sure. Ethan replied, "I've spent my whole life trying to control everything. Maybe it's time I learn how to let go." But letting go was harder than he imagined. For a man who had spent 2 decades defining himself through power, the idea of walking away felt like dying. He feared the emptiness, waiting on the other side, the silence without meetings, the absence of titles, the question of who he would be when there was no one left to follow him. Yet when he looked at Sophia, bruised but brave, and Noah, still small enough to trust without questions, he knew that control had never saved him. It had only blinded him. The court hearings moved quickly. Victoria's lawyers tried to twist the story, claiming exhaustion, misunderstanding, manipulation, but the evidence spoke louder. Photos, testimonies, Sophia's trembling voice telling her truth. The court granted Ethan full custody. Victoria was ordered into psychological evaluation and banned from contact. When the final papers were signed, Ethan stood outside the courthouse, the flashbulbs exploding around him, and whispered to himself, "It's over." But deep down, he knew healing was just beginning. Within a week, the Hale estate was empty. Paparazzi still gathered at the gate, shouting questions he didn't answer. He packed their things himself: Sophia's sketchbook, Noah's toy car, a small box of Grace's photos. Every item felt like a confession of what he had missed. The drive to Vermont took 9 hours. Through the windshield, the city lights faded into forests and rain-washed hills. Sophia sat quietly in the back seat, tracing shapes on the fogged window. Noah slept beside her, his teddy bear clutched tight. Ethan drove in silence, unsure if he was fleeing or returning. Each mile peeled away another layer of the life he'd built: the power, the money, the image, and left him with the one thing he hadn't learned how to hold: peace. When they reached the small wooden house Grace had loved, the porch creaked beneath his boots just as it had years ago. The air smelled of pine and rain. The kind of quiet Grace used to say felt like forgiveness. Sophia hesitated at the doorway, her voice small. "Is this where Mom lived?" Ethan nodded, a lump rising in his throat. "Yes. She used to bake cookies here on Sundays. You'd steal them before they cooled." For the first time in years, Sophia smiled, a fragile, uncertain smile, but real. Ethan's chest ached, not with guilt, but with something gentler. Maybe this was what starting over looked like, not redemption. But repère. The following days passed slower. There were no headlines here, no noisy, just the sound of Noah's laughter echoing through the trees. Ethan tried to fix things around the old house leaky faucets, chipped paint, and the broken porch light, but each time his hands shook. He wasn't used to this kind of work. He wasn't used to failing without consequence. But every mistake made Sophia laugh. And that laugh became his reward. At night, after the children slept, Ethan sat on the porch, staring into the woods. The fear of losing control still whispered inside him. What if I fail them again? What if I can't do this? But another voice, softer, kept answering. You already did the hardest part. You came home. And as the rain began to fall again, gentle this time, Ethan finally understood. The empire he built had made him powerful. But this holding his children close in a quiet house was what made him whole. In the weeks after they settled in Vermont, the silence of the countryside felt different. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was healing. The echoes of the mansion, the shouting, the lies, they were replaced by the soft rhythm of ordinary life. Sophia would wake early, help Ethan make pancakes, and laugh when the batter stuck to his shirt. Sometimes Noah would join, his tiny hands clapping when the pancakes flipped right. They were far from perfect, but they were trying, and that was enough. Ethan spent his mornings fixing things around the old house. He wasn't good at it. He hammered the wrong nails, painted over chipped wood with the wrong shade. But every mistake made Sophia giggle, and that sound alone felt like victory. For the first time, he didn't feel like a CEO controlling outcomes. He felt like a father learning from scratch. At night, when the children slept, he sat by the window, the stars bright over the Vermont hills, and whispered a thank you to Grace for loving him once, for leaving him with something worth saving. One afternoon, while sorting through the attic, he found an old box labeled Grace's Garden. Inside were tiny seed packets and a worn-out notebook filled with her handwriting. Sophia peeked in, eyes wide. She asked if they could plant them again. Ethan smiled and said they would. The next day, they dug in the backyard together. Noah splashed mud everywhere. Sophia laughed, and Ethan watched them both, as if seeing sunlight for the first time in years. Maria came back a month later. She arrived without warning, carrying a small suitcase and a smile that felt like home. Ethan didn't ask how she found them. She simply said, "I heard the house needed warmth again." He nodded, unable to speak. Sophia ran into her arms, the hug, long and wordless. That night, when Maria hummed the same lullaby Grace used to sing, the air inside the house felt whole again. Sophia changed too. The quiet, fearful girl began to fade. She still flinched at sudden noises sometimes, but she started talking more, laughing louder, even arguing with Noah about who got the bigger cookie. She painted every day now, filling the living room walls with colors. One morning, Ethan found her working on a new piece, a family standing under bright sunlight. The figures were simple: a tall man, a girl, a little boy, and beside them, a faint outline of a woman made of light. Sophia said softly, "It's called A Family in Sunlight." For Mom? Ethan couldn't answer. He just pulled her close, his chest tight with love and regret. "You made us whole again, sweetheart." She shook her head, smiling through her tears. "No, Daddy, you did. By summer, The house felt alive. Maria's cooking filled the kitchen. Noah's laughter spilled into the yard. And Sophia's drawings brightened every wall. Ethan started writing again, notes, reflections, small stories about the things he'd learned too late. One of those reflections caught the attention of a family support organization. They invited him to speak at a conference for parents about rebuilding connection after trauma. He almost said no. But Sophia insisted. "You always told me the truth matters. Daddy, maybe someone else needs to hear yours." So he went. The hall was full of parents, some tired, some broken, some trying. He didn't bring slides or numbers. He just spoke. He told them how easy it was to build towers of success and forget the small voices calling from the ground. He said love was not about providing everything, but about noticing when a child stops laughing. He ended his talk quietly, saying, "Sometimes the monster in your home doesn't hide in the dark. It smiles, says dinner's ready, and tells you everything's fine. Listen harder." The applause was soft, respectful. But what mattered more was the letter he received a week later from a mother who had walked out of an abusive home with her son after hearing him speak. Sophia read the letter out loud at breakfast, her voice steady and proud. Ethan looked at her, realizing she wasn't just healing, she was helping him heal too. On the last evening of that summer, they sat in the garden they'd planted together. The flowers from Grace's seeds had bloomed yellow, pink, white, each one alive in its own way. Sophia rested her head on his shoulder, whispering, "Mom would like this." Ethan smiled. "She would, but she'd love you more." As the sky turned gold, he realized that healing wasn't about forgetting the pain. It was about choosing to love again despite it. It was about rebuilding piece by piece until laughter became natural and love no longer had to whisper to be heard. And that night, as he watched his children sleep under the same roof where Grace once dreamed, Ethan finally understood. Some families are born from blood, others are rebuilt from forgiveness. But the strongest ones are born from love that refuses to give up. Spring arrived quietly that year, as if the world itself was learning to breathe again. The snow on the hills melted into silver threads of water, running through the grass where Sophia and Noah knelt, planting sunflower seeds in the soft, damp soil. Ethan stood on the porch, his hands resting on the railing, watching them with a calm he hadn't felt in years. The morning light touched their faces, and for a moment, it felt like even the earth was trying to say sorry for what it had taken. Sophia pressed her palms into the ground, smiling as Noah copied her. She looked up at her father and waved. Ethan walked over, kneeling beside them. He showed Noah how to cover the seeds gently, then looked at Sophia, his voice low. "These will grow tall, just like you." She laughed, soft but full of life. "And like you too, Daddy. You learned how to grow again." Ethan's throat tightened. There were so many things he wanted to say about guilt, forgiveness, and how love can survive even after breaking. But he realized he didn't need to. Everything he wanted to teach her was already growing in this soil, in this house, in the sunlight that touched their small family without asking for perfection. As the three of them sat there, the wind carried the scent of pine and earth. It was the same air Grace used to breathe. And Ethan felt her presence not in grief anymore, but in gratitude. He whispered to himself, "You'd be proud of them. You'd be proud of me too." Finally, the camera of life, if there were one, would pull back slowly, the small wooden house surrounded by early spring, a father and two children laughing in the dirt, sunlight stretching across their faces, no grand speeches, no miracles, just love, patient and real, finally finding its place. Because in the end, family isn't made of blood or last names. It's made of those who stay, who choose kindness when it's hardest, and who love even when it hurts. Ethan once believed success could build a legacy. Now he knew better. What lasts isn't the empire you build, but the hearts you heal along the way. And in that quiet Vermont morning, as two children planted hope into the earth, a father finally understood. The greatest victory of his life wasn't what he earned, but what he became, a man who learned to love again. From that one slap in a mansion full of silence came a father's awakening, a daughter's healing, and a reminder that love is never about perfection, it's about presence. Ethan Hale lost everything the world could see, only to find what truly mattered: the laughter of his children, the warmth of forgiveness, and the courage to start again. Maybe that's what family really means, not blood, but hearts that choose to stay. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs hope today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Emotional Echoes, where every story reminds us we're not alone in our pain or our healing. Thanks for listening.